So, Bill, you're headed to Philadelphia. Is it this weekend? Is that correct?
Yes, this weekend.
And you are going there for?
This is going to be the Pennsylvania Sports Hall of Fame Induction Awards Banquet, and Western Pennsylvania will be honored to present for induction Susie McConnell-Serio and George Novak.
Okay. And your involvement with, you are on that board, is that correct?
I'm on the executive board, and I'm tasked with the sort of subcommittee of sustainability and inclusivity recruitment.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about what's the process like?
Sure. The executive board has bylaws that govern the eligibility for induction into the chapter Hall of Fame. We're in the Western chapter. Mm-hmm. There are multiple chapters throughout the Pennsylvania State Sports Hall of Fame. One of the ways to the State Hall of Fame is through one or more of the chapters. The process starts with a nomination through an application that's available online at our website. The criteria specified. Usually it requires some level of significant achievement in a particular area or endeavor. Could be sports administration, could be a sports personality. Mm-hmm. Typically it's a coach, athlete, or an official. We're trying to broaden the categories given the wealth of talent in the region, both past, present, and looking into the future.
Okay. So
we get the nomination. The board then has a period of time to vet the applications. Usually there's 20 to 25 that we start from. Typically there's carryover from the year before. So you're probably talking about a pool of somewhere between 30 to 50 living and some deceased eligible participants to be considered for induction. The board then goes through a vetting process where we come down to basically 2 reads or 2 votes. You have to get a plurality of the voting members on the board. Then the individual, whether it's a male or female, a living or deceased, they go on a ballot. Membership carries the voting privilege. So if you are a member and you get this application with the ballot, the individuals that are eligible to receive your vote will then need your vote to get past the ballot.
Right.
Once you get past the ballot, again through a plurality, the top participants, let's say for instance there's 4 categories, we would probably do the top 2 of each of those 4 categories, and those majority winners would then be considered for the next class of induction. Okay,
and that's definitely vetting. That's a vetted process for sure.
Sure, you're probably talking about somewhere between 400 to 700 participants or voting members. We're continuing to expand that pool. We're looking to grandfather in all past awardees so that they would have an automatic right to vote, similar to some of the other Hall of Fame institutions. Now, the Western chapter is also unique in 2 ways. We have what's called an awardee or inductee of distinction. Typically, that's an individual. We'll use Roberto Clemente as an example. He was inducted into the Major League Baseball Sports Hall of Fame. So in that vein, given all of the career accolades, the fact that he was in the Hall of Fame, and that he was pretty much a humanitarian beyond measure, we inducted him by distinction, meaning he did not have to go through the normal vetting process.
Sure.
He was simply inducted, and it was a posthumous induction for Roberto.
You grew up in southwestern PA?
I was born and raised in the city of Pittsburgh, in the 19th Ward. It's Brookline. My parents.
So you're a city boy.
I'm a city boy. My mother still lives there on the street that I grew up on.
Right.
At the end of that street is our former grade school, Our Lady of Loretto. And in my backyard, we considered Moore Park pretty much a fantastic way to spend the day.
Sure, I bet. What stands out, any memorable moments in your childhood at all that might have sent you in the direction that you went, whether it was college, whether it was law?
Well, I believe there's all kinds of defining moments. I try to look at the things that I didn't accomplish, sort of the setbacks or the shortcomings. I've learned more from those than the wins or the successes or the awards or achievements. I would say that overcoming early on, I had a learning disability. And interestingly enough, my mom was able to recognize it and get me the help that I needed in early part of grade school. And then I would advance through academics, fairly like hard work, but still, consistent grades, usually Dean's List, high honors, honor society, got an academic scholarship to Duquesne University.
Right.
I like to think that I really sort of found myself or created and developed myself at Duquesne University when I was in college, a sort of a late bloomer. I really admired our baseball coach, Rich Spear. He was a humanitarian and in a lot of regards gave a lot of philanthropic and charitable causes, really looked beyond just playing baseball at a Division I level. And we were still sort of building that program. Duquesne, unfortunately, no longer has that program, but I was definitely a beneficiary of working with the team and understanding that if you want to go fast and not be successful, then you can take the route of an individual. But if you want to have a long career, if you want to go far, you have to buy into being a team player. So I would say that the experience of playing Division I baseball, Duquesne at the time, pretty much molded me, and I started to think about a career in law. Duquesne University is known as the law school for judges, and I was fortunate enough early in my career to work for several outstanding jurists in Western Pennsylvania at the federal, state, and county levels. They continue to influence and shape what I am trying to do present and what I intend to do in the future in terms of a legacy and giving back and helping people. So the education part has always been from the time of grade school through to law school, and even today I'm a major participant in various continuing legal education programs, sometimes up at the university, for instance, the Wecht Institute. Dr. Wecht has me and his son occasionally present on topics that they would require some of my expertise, sometimes dealing with cyber crimes, sometimes dealing with child sex abuse cases, others dealing with environmental issues. So I've sort of had a diverse, broad, well-rounded experience, and I credit that again to the education and the opportunities that presented themselves up at Duquesne University.
Was there one moment that turned you to law? Family member? Was this someone that you admired? A judge possibly? That just, what was the trigger that I want to get a law degree? What was the trigger?
Well, my mother had worked for the McGardle law firm. The law firm itself was premised on helping injured individuals. Jim McGardle was at that time considered probably one of the greatest lawyers in Western Pennsylvania, if not most of the United States. He was a tremendous trial lawyer, had a way with people, could connect to juries, and represented a lot of people that didn't have somebody to fight for them, pretty much the underdog. So listening to the stories that my mom would tell as she would come back from work when I was a young boy, and going to the office with her occasionally and meeting some of those lawyers, the Bill Carasellis, Ed Beechlers of the world, that molded sort of the concept that if I'm going to be somebody that helps others and problem solve, that this might be something that I would take a liking to. I then was fortunate enough to get experience in government and helping people. I started at city council in the city of Pittsburgh, and I worked for Councilman Jack Wagner back in the day. And I also worked with Mark Pollock, who was an at-large council member, and they had me researching various issues concerning community development, trying to deal with problems that the constituents would raise occasionally. And so my second area of, work in building a foundation was working to help those people in the community. And it strengthened sort of my belief that this is something that I wanted to do. I seem to be able to find the answers that some of the other pages weren't able to find. I sort of had a knack, and it's sort of unexplained, but most of my superiors always say, well, you come at this from a different perspective. You're able to see something that nobody else sees. And usually these problems are problems that have been kicked around unsuccessfully by other people. So I don't try to do things the way they've always been done. I've sort of taken a step back, and before I get involved in a project, I take a look at all of the factors that I think might weigh in on it. And I try to think like the opposing party. People would comment frequently when I worked as a prosecutor, well, how do you know where the defense is going? And now that I'm on the defensive cases, a lot of my clients come to me to help them because they understand that I know not just where the prosecutor is going, but from the standpoint of what's the judge, what is he or she likely to think in this particular instance. So I would think that the experience of watching my mom work in a law firm at the time, that's what I knew in my heart that I wanted to do, because I always felt strongly about helping other people.
You mentioned cybercrime, one of your specialties. Now, when was your first introduction into cybercrime? Do you remember approximately when it was? And was it a particular case, particular issue that came about?
I was working with the Office of Attorney General for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and Attorney General Corbett asked me to attend a seminar in Mississippi at Ole Miss. And so I went down with several other prosecutors from our office in different departments, and we were joined by a slew of other attorney generals from across the United States. We were brought there to sort of focus on this phenomena of the internet and all of the different ways individuals can exploit other people by using the internet. And the primary focus for me at the time was the child predator unit. Mr. Corbett asked me when I started there to spearhead the charge to protect children from individuals that were seeking to sexually abuse them and exploit them online. And I started that in the Western District, but I eventually covered all three districts, the Middle and the Eastern, and we had about 6 agents. We worked our way up from 2 agents to 6, and then it became a specially dedicated unit under one of the successor attorney generals that came in during my tenure there. So my focus originally was to protect children online that were being sexually preyed upon. Many instances of individuals pretending to be somebody that they were not, usually to gain the trust of the child. The child would be somebody that we had as in an undercover capacity. You sort of read through the texts of the chats, the messaging component, as well as some of the visuals. There were the optics. We would record conversations and monitor them under the Wiretap Act. We would have undercover sting operations, usually in an area that we deemed to be an easy way to protect society so that we wouldn't take unreasonable risks with these predators. Many times we knew these people were of the mindset that they were operating in anonymity, but through investigative techniques and methods, we were able to ascertain the true identity of these individuals and their tendencies and what they were in terms of their criminal history. So we had arrested over 200 in probably a 2 to 3 year window. In many of these cases, I personally prosecuted from the beginning of the filing of the charges to the very end, whether it was a trial and a verdict or the defendant opted to take a plea agreement. And Usually they were incarcerated. Many times they were incarcerated in the state, and I would say probably about 6 to 8% were deemed to be sexually violent predators and are serving well in excess of 10 years in prison. And many of them now, since I've left that office and rejoined the private sector, they're starting to come up now for parole. So what I've done recently in terms of the cybercrime world started towards the end of my tenure at the Office of Attorney General. We were looking at white-collar fraud. I'll give you an example. Individuals that were operating in organized crime units with ties to Africa and other parts of Asia and Europe, they were able to utilize personal identified information, your social security number, date of birth, tracking or routing numbers, and they would put together fraudulent tax returns, and they would file these online through like a TurboTax. At the time, the state was not exercising protocols to detect IP addresses, so individuals could file multiple, and they did, numerous tax returns pretending to be other people, typically people that were incarcerated, sometimes children, sometimes individuals that already died.
Right.
And what happens is then they get these prepaid debit cards as part of their process to file the tax return for the refund, and the state, usually the Department of the Treasury, would, and in instances of the federal tax returns, they would return the tax dollars to the individuals through these prepaid debit cards. So how we uncovered that was amazing in terms of the teamwork, the coordination of different law enforcement agencies using satellite technology, using video surveillance. We were able to stop this ring that was operating out of Atlanta, Georgia, that had typically 4 to 5, I guess, primary operatives that bilked the taxpayers here, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, to the tune of about $400,000. We had stopped an additional $200,000, but we sort of let some of the money pass through in terms of the undercover operation. We were able to apprehend these individuals, execute warrants, along with the U.S. Attorney's Office in Atlanta. We had a dual or parallel prosecution. Those individuals had targeted the United States government, and in the time of their crime spree, were successful in getting $13 million of federal tax monies that were owed to the people that actually earned those tax returns. So that was some of the ways that I was exposed to the dark side of the web, if you will. There are other things that now I've been consulting on and retained to do in terms of cyber breaches.
Like, it's mentally and emotionally difficult. It has to be emotionally difficult work over a long period of time. On the prosecutorial side as well, and the investigative side, it had to be difficult for you.
I would say that I had authored several internal memorandums to my superiors bringing that issue up as far as a workplace issue, a health issue. I know myself, I try to now limit my time, although because of my business and some of the other things that I'm doing professionally, I still have to be communicating through means of multimedia. But yes, you're correct. It does take a toll on individuals. It requires really a certain special kind of individual to endure that experience. Somebody that is high functioning and somebody that has a short memory to move on to the next case.
Stepping aside and going into the financial end of it there, it's a constant challenge, I would imagine, in this line of work because the technology keeps changing. And it seems like as each year goes by, the technology is changing faster and faster. What kind of chase was that? I mean, any levels of frustration there as you folks went along? And
I think that's fairly accurate in terms of the observation. To go back to a previous question and answering this question, I do believe that the laws that we had originally when the internet was spawned lagged in terms of the perspective, the breadth of how the internet actually worked. And in coordination with multidiscipline aspects of bringing people with the technical or the computer training and backgrounds to help draft appropriate laws that extended the protections of individuals or guarded against the harms that could be reasonably foreseen. That's where we're at. But still, the battle is that in many instances, the government is playing catch up to the individuals that are utilizing a good resource for bad purposes or financial gain, exploiting others. I think that globally, the secret courts, to some extent, are necessary in order to respond in a more proactive or a timely basis to thwart a lot of the criminal enterprises and operations that are trying to hack into companies for trade secrets or inside information for purposes of healthcare related analytics. I mean, people can glean a lot of information from data that's out there, generally speaking, and they could put any type of application to that, including the type of methodology that I just described in terms of a tax fraud.
Right.
So companies can see their assets, for instance, healthcare employers or unions, school districts, even government. There are lots of individuals operating outside of the United States that profit from exploiting the way in through the back door or different protocols that may be rendered inoperable through, again, software and technologies that continue to change on a day-to-day basis. I
would think you try to be proactive, but you probably find yourself more in a reactionary standpoint, kind of reacting to the crime that's been committed and wondering, how did this obviously happen? And we have to find out how it was done and correct it and prosecute. That just seems like a very, to the layman, or to the average person listening to that sounds like a lot of work and can be confusing and frustrating.
Well, and I think some of the gains that we've made have come from a lot of younger people, the millennials, the think tanks that we have here that sometimes we take for granted, the resources that we have at Carnegie Mellon, the resources that we have with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, some of the other alphabet agencies that have dedicated people to waging this cyber war to protect people from harm, whether it's financial harm or physical harm or terroristic activities. I also believe that getting some of the people that have implemented these criminal activities, thing that comes to mind is the great forger, Frank Abagnale, in the Catch Me If You Can sort of movie, where the government was actually asking the individual that had been the criminal to help them make sure that that type of activity doesn't occur again. So I do understand that a lot of the private sector industries are hiring former prosecutors or special agents, people with versatility and an experience set that translates into protecting, their assets or the assets of their customers and clients.
Just general good advice for the average consumer out there, because we're getting constantly robocalls, and obviously a lot of these criminals prey on the elderly, because the elderly, the aged, at times will give up more information on the phone.
If you're asking me the three biggest ways to avoid the problem of being a victim of identity theft or some type of a cyber fraud, I think one, it's applying your own sort of standard of, if this sounds too good to be true, then it's not, and you would want to err on the side of caution and explain to that individual, whether they're targeting you online or over the phone, look, send it through the mail. And typically, if it is a bogus scam, they want to avoid the postal process, because the postal inspectors are very vital to our national security and protection of citizens, especially our vulnerable ones, the senior citizens. I think the second way to protect oneself is to try to minimize your imprint as far as any electronic transactions. And I know that's sort of counter the way things are going in our society with banks or mortgage companies or real estate transactions, where there's an emphasis on doing things in an expedited way, paperless and online.
So you're not really for that then?
I would say that that can be done, but you're probably looking at some type of an encrypted protocol that would go along with securing that the information is not going to be in a position where it could be used by people that are not privy to the transaction. I think the third order of business would be to actually adhere to a particular good standard of best practices with your personal identifying information and protecting your passwords and changing them frequently. You know, if you think about the presumption that you are fair game and that you can be a victim at any second of the day, and you have that mindset, I think that you become less predictable and you change your patterns and you do things at different cycles of the day or the month. And in that way, when you take that step back, if you feel that somebody is targeting you, they're usually going to bump into you, and you're going to know, hey, look, I had my suspicions up, my guard was not let down, and I prevented this scam from making me a victim.
When you made the decision to go into private practice, also on the end of it, talk a little bit about the unfortunate perception that a lot of the public has about attorneys, not just the money end of it, just you know, I hate to use the word stigma, but there's a stigma out there with that particular field, like a lot of other ones. Talk a little bit about that as well, if you would.
Sure. I'm celebrating 25 years as a practicing lawyer in good standing throughout all of Pennsylvania. The type of law, the projects that I am vested in currently are not the types per se of the projects or the work that I've done in the past. Whether I believe all of those previous experiences, however, have prepared me to take advantage of these skills and life's experiences to be of different use or a more unique perspective for clients that have problems in the areas of regulatory compliance, licensing issues, issues concerning best practices, internal investigations with their own businesses, perhaps dealing with a poor perception from the public or the audience, developing strategic communications and marketing to brand that entity or nonprofit. I tend to want to use the networks of people that I've come across and either worked against or worked for. Typically, you can learn a little bit on both sides of any type of a dispute. So trying to be proactive in mediating disputes, whether they're grievances with the employees, coming up with better employment-related practices, whether it's succession planning for people that have a family-run business that are looking to maybe pass on their success to their children, maybe franchise their business. So we really are collaborating with other professionals that I've worked with, or like I said, in some instances worked against, but grew through the admiration that they would give competent, objective, and solid advice to a particular company, individual, firm, or again, a nonprofit. I think that part of what I'm trying to do is to be of a unique perspective. I think that my concept is to try to move the law forward, to help people with being proactive rather than responsive to the types of problems that are going to exist down the road. For instance, I feel that our environment is really at risk. If we do not start taking precautionary and aggressive steps towards protecting individuals in the workplace. So part of what I'm trying to do for the unions, friends that I've shared experiences with at picnics, or, you know, over the ball field with our children.
Right.
They come to me and say, well, look, you know, I've been a welder for 20 years. I've been exposed to these types of substances. What do you think? And, well, I look at that problem from different perspectives, and I say, well, I would hope that our legislators, both at the federal and state level, are starting to pay attention to the need for increasing the precautions and protections that our workers need in the mills, out in the field, in any workplace environment. I also feel that the individuals that work in the areas of the manufacturing or the job creating, they need to partner with the people on the other side of the dynamic, namely the scientists and the people that work for the environmental firms. I think that they can both create a synergy that makes Western Pennsylvania pretty much energy enthused, energy driven, where it's a win-win, and people can clearly understand what the risks are. And I think part of the problem with the current climate is there's a lack of transparency. There's a lack of openness.
Okay. People
are questioning what companies are doing with water sources, with our air, with our ground, where things are being dumped. Again, picking up on my experience in the Attorney General's office where I prosecuted environmental crimes, in many instances, these companies don't have the people on hand in their own organization to prevent or to give them a better perspective on how to handle that type of waste or toxic chemical. They don't want to spend, or they don't have the money to spend. So trying to take the perspective of the government that's regulating them, in many instances, that agency shouldn't just be a hammer, but it should be an asset or an aid to prevent, to consult them, to say, hey, look, you know, there are funds that are available, but you need to go through the proper protocol, and the government will help you help the people that work for you or that are going to enjoy your product or service. So I think that coming back now to the legal community and the perception or the stigma, just the other day I commented it to a colleague that's been practicing for 40 years, so he has a few more years on me, and I said, you know, it used to be where you could pick up the phone and strike up a conversation with an adversary, somebody that's representing another party to a particular dispute, and you could take everything at face value, excuse me, and you would believe that individual. That's no longer the case. You have to do your own due diligence. In many instances, when I inquire and I go online and I take a look at the licensing bodies and the regulatory agencies over the practice of law, you find that these individuals have been previously disciplined for various improprieties. And that's a sad commentary, because we are, as a profession, tasked with vetting people that are coming into the profession, but also monitoring and enforcing the compliance with the individuals that are currently practicing law. So it's hard for, I guess, the average person that's not an attorney, that's not on that inside track of this profession, to say, well, it's broken, how do we fix it? If they can't police their own, and that's just one example. I think that the trust factor amongst most citizens of any type of government or big business, that's lacking today. There's no sense of these people really care about me, that they have integrity. And again, if they tell me they're going to do something, then yes, they're going to do it. We can rest assured that their word is their bond.
In my field of real estate, I love the word advocate, because I really believe in my heart that I'm an advocate for my client. And I feel that with you as well too. The word advocate to means you're going to take care of this person who is entrusted to you to do work. And I think now more than ever, at least from my experience over the past couple of years, you have to be very discerning when you choose an attorney. You need to do your homework. And let's face it, a lot of citizens won't. They may not even know the avenues online to even research. So again, I think to hear you say that you, in conversation with other colleagues at times, it's worse than it ever has been because there's disciplinary in their backgrounds and other things that have happened. Do you ever lose faith in your own I don't know, your own profession at times?
I think that part of the reason that I continue to do what I do the way that I do it is because I have to be that example to the public and to other practitioners that potentially even the students that at the law school look up to particular practitioners as role models to say, look, I don't have to cut corners to make a reasonable living. I do not have to jump off the bridge because everybody else is jumping. I don't have to market or advertise in such an aggressive or soliciting fashion.
Right.
You know, I think that the sheer numbers of how many lawyers are in the practice, and the practice is not for everyone. It's a lot like being a professional athlete. You have a life shelf. There are only limited options on how many positions or practices areas you can competently because of technology, because of how things are rapid. I know that I've streamlined my practice in order to be competitive and marketable in the area where I've spent most of my time. And I enjoy having the referral network for the attorneys that they have their particular individual practice areas. So I think that unless you're in a very rural area where there is a scarcity of attorneys, you're not going to see general practitioners in the same sense that when I started the practice back in 1993. And even then, I think we were starting to move towards a specialist, a more focused type of practice with boutique law firms, and then your larger firms that would have separate, you know, groups that independently operated but under one umbrella to give that sort of a full stop, one-stop shop type of a service to clients.
Talk a little bit about charity, your philanthropic endeavors, because you're involved in so much, whether it's the boards that you're on, the events that you organize and you spearhead. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, my personal relationship with the Lord, being a Catholic, being involved as president of the Sarah Club for the Diocese of Pittsburgh, basically being the son of my parents and watching how they would always go the extra mile to help people that were less fortunate, getting experience in the inner city when growing up and till this day, formulating relationships with individuals that share that commonality of that passion to give what they can. I try to stay focused on the areas that have been personal to me or my family. And by that I mean I lost my sister-in-law, my wife's sister, to cancer, and for the past 15 years our family had contributed, spearheaded, assisted others in raising awareness as well as funds for research with people that are preeminent experts in the field that work for the Hillman Cancer Institute, University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. We also have a great relationship with the doctors at Allegheny General Hospital as a result of that personal dealing. We certainly will continue to do that because that is our legacy for in honor of our past our sister-in-law. Myself, I'm a survivor. I experienced a heart incident several years back and felt very strongly that the team of doctors and medical professionals allowed me to return to my game and not lose a step, so to speak. They've actually encouraged me and strengthened me to go beyond what I've done and to continue to push myself, even though it's not easy the older you get. So I've developed relationships in in the past with, for instance, Coaches versus Cancer, and we raised significant sums of money to help people that had cancer, and on that particular committee. As far as the heart awareness, I've walked several times with some of my therapists and physicians and support staff, UPMC Cardio. They're doing remarkable research. The training regimen that they put me through is first class, world class. I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be able to do the things. They typically would say that I'm the rarity. It wasn't my time, because people usually don't survive what I experienced that day. So I feel very fortunate that I've been given a second chance then to give back, which plays into the philanthropic or charitable work. Coming up in a middle class, working class neighborhood in Brookline, I had been watching the results of a nonprofit called Brookline Teen Outreach, and I researched some of the individuals that have leadership roles, Caitlin McNulty, for instance, and I started to think that this would be something that would be a win-win, where I could show my community my passion to help people and guide them where they can be influenced in a positive way towards whether it's blue-collar work with the trades. I'm going to try to initiate a program over the summer, or whether it's a career in law and government, such as the path that I took. I'm trying to put together a group of mentors in a multidisciplinary approach for these teenagers, and we're going to be talking about that at our next board meeting. I just think that I'm the type of person that has never forgotten where he's come from, and so I look forward to continuing to work with Brookline Teen Outreach's. The future holds a bright and high expectations for this group. Some of the local community work that I do in South Fayette comes back to my thoughts on education. Libraries. I'm on the board at the library. This will be my final year. We just had a very successful fundraiser, Beer for Books, where we try to engage the community, both the adults, to give back, to help shape the future of the library in South Fayette.
Libraries are struggling, I'm guessing, because of technology.
Yes, we have analytics that our director shares with us as a board, and we see in real time how the users of the library, whether they're on-site patrons or over the internet patrons, what their preferences are, what types of programs they would like to attend. We get feedback and interactive questionnaires. Certainly, it's not the library that we may have grown up with in terms of all of the books or the selection. There's more on how to, self-taught. I think those types of programs, allowing people to engage and connect or network through the library. Across Allegheny County, there are lots of programs this month. Today's the last day of September. It's Love Your Library Month. And so many of the libraries, if they're not having fundraisers to make up the shortfall in terms of the grants and the public funding that we get through local municipalities or our state government, our current Governor Wolf has actually, this will be the first year that there's been an increase in funding for the libraries. Which is kind of, a good problem to have, because now we can recalculate our budgets accordingly based upon the sharing of this additional state funding. So the library board itself is trying to become more diverse and inclusive. We want to have younger people take ownership over the vision of what they want for this community, in terms of the amenities of a facility, in terms of the types of programming, any other activities that we can use the library as a resource to attract businesses, to attract young families with children, to spend time there, to make it a win-win situation. So I've toured numerous libraries throughout Allegheny County. I do feel a positive energy amongst the very talented librarians and staff. But certainly to get to where we all need to be in the future, it's going to require teamwork and a more concentrated effort on raising funds.
One of the benefits that I'm absolutely aware of is that folks that don't, believe it or not, folks that don't have access to the internet or might not be familiar with the internet, they could be from our generation and just never paid much attention to it. They're looking for jobs. That's an outlet for them to go in, a public outlet, resource, and they can learn about the internet or learn how to apply for a job online. And they're not going to find that anywhere else. I mean, and the libraries have been tremendously beneficial in that regard. I can speak personally from knowing folks that have needed that and have gotten it there, which was encouraging to me when I heard that, because the year 2019, I don't think much of my library in terms of outside of driving past it probably. But I have a friend who uses it vibrantly here in Moon Township, and it would really be a shame if they went by the wayside. I really believe that.
Well, that brings a common observation. I agree with what you're saying. I feel so strongly in that observation that one of the things that I believe would act as a incubator or a catalyst, if you will, is with the university, any university. I'm a Duquesne alumni. I'm on the board of governors. What we've been trying to do with some of our talented undergraduates and graduate students is to give them opportunities in volunteer internships to help municipalities with their financing, with their planning, with their operations, and giving those young adults that are potentially in the pipeline to be hired a hands-on experience that would then distinguish them from competition for any particular job, let alone a service industry type job. I think that the interaction with the community and individuals and helping people as a part of the curriculum, as part of these internships, again, it creates a win-win opportunity. It allows the municipality or the community to have resources or talents that they wouldn't necessarily be able to pay for.
Sure.
And it also gives the individuals looking for those types of experience resume builders and things that would influence their way of thinking in terms of future careers. It also gives them an ability to build on their strengths and work on their weaknesses in terms of communications and skill sets. We're seeing a lot of our millennials working in a different way than we are accustomed to. But I do believe that there's a common ground, and people that are baby boomers can learn from our millennials
without question.
And I think that there's a win-win in that type of a relationship. So part of the work that I am doing that's laying the foundation for the future is that I'm working with these millennials.
Sure.
I'm trying to understand their perspective, because if I'm about service and servant leadership, I have to be able to lead all walks of life, whether they're in the LGBT community, whether they're in the African American community, whether they're in some other minority. I know women businesses. I've probably gained more clients in those particular areas that I just spoke of, the minority sort of spectrum of people with disabilities now, working at the board of Autism Speaks. I'm understanding the perspective that my wife lives every day as a paraeducator in the South Fayette School District, working with kids on the spectrum. And it brings up another movie, Seabiscuit, where you almost had individuals that all had some type of shortcoming or some type of personality that may not have been quote-unquote mainstream, but yet they were able to work together in spite of their disabilities or disadvantages to overcome that adversity and to put on just a tremendous legacy in our history. So I think during the Depression, no less. So there's no time like the present for people that are entrepreneurial, such as yourself or myself, to constantly try to refine and improve what we've done in order to do even better in what we want to do in the future. So I think that's investing in time, and we will see a return on that investment. The last thing that I want to say, as far as the things that we've discussed on this show, as far as my brand, that goes back to my vision of the law is not going to be the law practice of 10, 15, 20 years ago. This goes towards the way a lawyer has to be able to be versatile in order to see all sides of a particular issue and to be able to get along with different people that weigh in on the solution to that particular problem, whether it's a private sector problem or a public sector problem.
This was very good, my friend. It's very good. You got to come back and see me again.
Oh, I will.
Absolutely.
And I hope you come and see me.
I plan on it. And before we get out of here, are you still the baseball fan?
I love baseball.
I knew the answer to that question. Still the baseball fan. That's good.
I love baseball.
That's good.
I don't know if you knew, but I also umpired as well.
I did not know that.
So
did not know that.
I got used to calling the balls and strikes.
You're a brave man.
I got used to taking the heckles and the where's your glasses?
What leagues did you umpire?
I umpired usually in the city.
Okay.
And it was primarily, I wouldn't say, like pony, colt, and Legion ball.
Okay.
And so I had many days at Herschel Field, or
very familiar with it.
Olympia Park,
familiar with it.
Danny McGivney Memorial, Moore Park, Bon Air, Overbrook. It was something I got to do with my dad, and and I just lost my father about a month ago, and darn it if it some of the social events that I've attended where my dad's contemporaries, the few that remain, always commented as, boy, man, you actually got to umpire games with your dad. That had to be pretty good. And I says, yeah, but I always went behind the plate.
Good. Yeah, a little harder back there, pal.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Again, thank you so much. This means a lot to me.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
I found this to be a very unique experience.
Yeah.